I'm gonna touch briefly on some existing diagrams, and then I'm gonna get into the performance monitoring side and sort of discovery. So with netTerrain, we are a network documentation tool built for that. You can create diagrams, different types of diagrams. This is just showing off sort of hierarchical sort of view where you can navigate or drill down into multiple diagrams and see things like a campus environment and get into physical connectivity, fiber and strands and that sort of thing. I won't really get into that today too much unless you have specific questions around that. But normally when you're talking about network documentation, you have a tendency, of course, you want to automate this as much as possible, but also, what is network documentation to you? It could be something like a physical hierarchy, sort of emulating your sort of as-built environment where you want to show rack elevations, devices inside those racks where they're rack mounted, or maybe they're not even devices in a cabinet. They could just be wherever they are in your environment and be able to show those things off. So we build this documentation, or it is built using the catalog of objects you see on the right-hand side, where you've got nodes, racks, devices, cards, links that are used to effectively create these objects that you can use in your diagrams if you want to, where you'll see they have things like ports and slots for cards, and you can create connectivity. But of course, maybe the diagram you want is simply, I just want to discover, I want to understand some relationships between objects in my network, and maybe possibly do some monitoring of some data points for those objects. So when I say objects, I mean typically it's going to be devices when you get into things like discovery and or monitoring, because you're talking about things that are typically SNMP enabled devices um, that you might want to monitor. So I switched to a different drawing view here. This is more of a, I guess you'd call this a logical pseudo-physical. You're missing patch panels and things here, but from a discovery standpoint, the tool itself will go out and do that discovery and understand the connectivity and the organization of objects and how they sort of connect together with each other. So, um, but the question is, again, when you start to get into network documentation, how can you do it in a way that one, hopefully you can automate in some way, right? You can um, discover or leverage data that you have and bring it into a network drawing. In my case, in this example, what we wanted to talk about was discovery, but also getting data over time for some of the objects. So as an example, something like discovery, you typically would set up through a connector, what we refer to as a connector. I guess I'd actually already opened that over here. But we have different connector types you can set up. You can add new connectors where you would come down here and kind of choose from some pre-existing ones, anything from discovery via SNMP or connections to things like SolarWinds or ServiceNow, Remedy, etc., where you can pull data from. But if you're doing more discovery devices, you want to use our software to do that. Again, that's typically via SNMP. So as an example, I've got a few devices here set up with an IP address and the version, so you can see it's version 2C or version 3, whatever it is you want to do. I'm doing individual IPs. You can set up ranges, so you can do a slash network. You don't have to do just individual IPs. I just do that here because it's in our lab and we do testing and other things. So I like to isolate things a little bit, but it's relatively easy to set up. It's really just a matter of coming in, enabling the connector, putting in your IP ranges, your version, your community string information, and then deciding kind of what you're going to discover, which I usually just say, give me everything to start with. You can always filter things out later. And then press discover. It goes out and does a discovery. And we do this, we have different means for doing discovery. We can do it with our, what we call our collector, which is sort of a standalone app executable. You can do it directly from the server as well, where netTerrain's installed. We have this thing called the Probe app that also would run and go interact with the GUI here and facilitate the discovery and pulling data and sort of pushing data, so on and so forth. So again, what that really allows you to do is you get back to the fact that after you do run a discovery of data and information, it'll find the object, the device, and then create the device in netTerrain. So these are all created from the fact they were discovered, and they are mapped to an object type in our catalog. So on the right-hand side, you have these device types. So that's sort of the way it works is you put in your IP ranges, community strings, have it do a discovery. Data is found, objects are found. They're not necessarily in a diagram, one single diagram. They might be in multiples based on the IP ranges and stuff. But you can take those objects and move them. All of these objects I moved into this one diagram because it's not a ton of stuff from the lab, but I just wanted to have it in one sort of view where I could see things. If you're doing obviously larger discoveries, you're doing discoveries across multiple locations, you can keep the objects in those locations. You can even take these objects and move them into the physical hierarchy. So like rack elevations, if you want the objects to show up in the cabinets, you can certainly do that too, where in my case, I am called aliasing the objects to the cabinet. So I can always see where the object is physically, how it's in the sort of lab environment, where is it? But I can also see where it is in the cabinet elevation view. So more of a logical drawing, and then you got your physical drawings up to you. But again, back to doing the discovery. What else does that allow you to do? Well, if you look at an object, in addition to discovering the object, if there's other OID or value data that you want to capture and capture as an individual data point in time or capture that data over time, you can do that too. What does that mean? Well, on the left-hand side of the screen, I've got some different values like battery capacity, output current, voltage, and energy set up. And these values are coming directly from the device. So like if I'm looking at a temperature sensor, I can see the data for that device directly. So in netTerrain, you have data fields for each object type, and those data fields you can specify an OID for some piece of data that you want to capture from the device. So for instance, my temperature sensor gateway has different data fields. So anything from contact to dew point to external and internal temperatures to an IP address. But if I want to capture data over time, I can grab an OID and place it into or for a particular field and configure that and set that up. And I can set it up for certain units. I can set it up, min and max. What am I going to see in sort of the graph? It actually do different colors and things like that as well. And what that'll give you is the ability to look at a particular device type and be able to click on it and actually see at a given point in time, data over time. So for instance, I want to see my temperature over time for the last week. I can see the temperature and sort of see how it's fluctuating, at a certain time of day, 5 a.m. Obviously it's cooler in the lab versus probably what's more like an afternoon, 4 p.m. kind of thing, where it's a bit warmer. You can start to see that, and you can see that trend. And you could set thresholds too. So you can say, well, if I exceed 100 degrees or 95 or something that makes sense, you could have it send an alert, so an email notification or SMS message. So again, they're not. It's pretty easy to configure and set these things up. Again, with respect to the connectors, you're putting your IP addresses, your ranges. With respect to trying to capture data or data points over time, it's really just a matter of creating a data field and knowing what the OID is of the value you want to capture. How can you find out what those OIDs are? Well, usually from the manufacturer, you can request the information. You can grab it via like an SNMP walk. A lot of times certainly go out and use an AI tool or something to do a lookup of, hey, how do I get temperature out of this particular device type and manufacturer? And you'll typically get results. I mean, obviously, if they're manufacturers you purchase and you have support agreements and things like that, you can usually request them to let you know, hey, what are the OIDs that I can monitor and for specific items. Again, for something like temperature sensor, in my case, it's got dew point and temperature. For something like a PDU, it's going to be obviously things like power, current. If it's got a battery, maybe battery capacity, just to kind of see where you're at over time. PDUs, you might be checking the current full load of the PDU in watts or current load over time. It just, kind of depends again on what you're trying to track. This is load amps, pretty consistent for this device. Doesn't have much variation. Again, this is a lab devices for us, so it's not usually a lot of variation here, except for when we do some testing and things like that. So, and again, you can have multiple sort of values that you're monitoring or keeping tabs on over time. So it's not like you have to do one, just only one. Now, you could also grab data and not necessarily use the charts where you're seeing the data over time. That's up to you. I mean, some folks they just want the whatever the last reading was. They want to see that, and then again, they may use that as a means of sort of triggering an alert or an alarm within the tool. Again, those are not hard to set up. Usually, it's your admin can go in and check the call the global settings, and there'll be information notifications for objects where you can click and go in and see what is currently configured, like my server check gateway internal temperature. If it hits 100 degrees or is greater than 100, then send out an email to support, right? Or maybe you want to do an SMS notification. Doesn't matter.
So Jason,
But
so for those our monitoring part that you're showing, that's
Mhm.
great that we show temperature. Is there like any limitation of what we
No.
can show in the time series graph, like CPU utilization, uh,
Mm.
and you have output?
It's about the OIDs. So
Yeah,
depends on the manufacturer and device type. I mean, some devices you buy, they don't have anything. They're not SNMP enabled.
yeah,
But most folks we deal with, they have devices that typically are PDUs for getting power. Again, watts or load or current. It depends on what you want to grab data from.
uh,
Um, as far as like a server or a router or something, you could definitely get CPU utilization. You might get port traffic, so you can get down to port level on a device. I think I have this one configured. Let me go see if I can get the port traffic series. That takes a little longer to bring up, um, but we don't sort of limit that. I mean, and it also with respect to like your notifications, there's really no limit on that. I mean, you can notify based on really any of those sort of values and pieces of data that you're looking at. So let me see if I have one for the week. There we go. So this is showing a port, specific port, showing the data over time for that port. You can see again, not very high utilization rates for this particular port, but the point is you can get that. And again, if you want to set thresholds around that, you can certainly do that. I'll leave that one up. We'll just go back to this diagram here. You can technically, monitor other things besides just, temperature and power. And I mean, really, there's not a limit. It really just comes down to device and object. We do some monitoring of like doors when the doors open, door closes. You can kind of see, at what point in time did a door open, did a door close, because you can really tap into lots of different devices, that aren't necessarily switches and routers, right? Or even temperature
and
sensors.
yeah, and we're vendor agnostic, right?
It's just about SNMP. That's
Yeah.
correct. So it's not so
Okay.
much about a vendor. It's about are they SNMP enabled? Version 2 and 3 typically are what's used, and do they provide uh, uh, ex- OIDs, do they provide data for you to monitor? Not everybody does. Sometimes you have to buy a certain model type, a little bit higher end to get some of those features and functionality. Most manufacturers will already have an interface to be able to see those values, right? Like my temperature sensor here, I can go to a web page for that sensor and actually see those data points, but they're not data over time, and they're not sort of all fed into my network documentation. I have to go out and open that tool every time, and this way I can get that data again over time and be able to see it over time, and not rely on having to go to some other website or some tool that really doesn't give me any of that information, doesn't necessarily do trigger alerts and so
Right.
on. So
Sorry, I'm hijacking this a little bit.
no, it's okay.
You can move around
Questions again?
these objects, right, Jason?
Yeah, you can move these anywhere. You can move them to a different diagram. So if you want
Hmm.
to sort of rebuild your drawing somehow, these I just did a discovery and moved everything into this one diagram because that's just how I wanted to present it
Okay.
uh, from a lab standpoint. But you can alias them into the racks, like I was showing before,
Yeah.
where you have the rack elevation. That's pretty common. Most folks want to do a discovery, see the connectivity. I didn't really talk about the connections because you do have lots of different link data you might discover, anything from ARP to bridge table to CDP to LLDP. Sometimes you get port to port, just depends on the device types and what protocol you're sort of discovering as far as the data comes from. But most of the time, you at least get device to device, so you know which two devices are sort of interconnected or connected together. LLDP and CDP are pretty good at showing that sort of information. You can get in layer three, like IP address sort of connectivity, but that's not usually as accurate physical connection type things. So.
Okay. And you can add as much data fields for any devices, right? So,
Yeah. So on the left-hand side, you have I have about 15 data fields here where I'm capturing data. Some aren't even really capturing data directly. Some are just meant for somebody to put data in if they want to. But yeah, there's no real limitation per type. So like this is a Cisco 3750X. I can go in and add additional data fields. I have to be a power user and admin to do that. But I can add more data fields to capture either directly from the SNMP device or just that I'm going to manually add, or maybe they come from a different system. You can certainly do that. There's an audit trail. So as data comes in, whether it's SNMP data or whether it's manually added, you'll end up with an audit trail of everything that's been happening for that device as well.
nice.
So, anyway, any other questions or thoughts? We do have the ability to do, various reports. We have tools for doing query builder report. We have some built-in reports through a dashboard reporting tool that you can check out and use as well. There's lots of ways to get data out, certainly get data into the system via discovery or again connectors or Excel import. So a lot of flexibility there. What I would say is if you're looking for a tool, you want to try things out, as Aiden mentioned, you can definitely you know try out the software first, and whether it's for SNMP discovery or Excel import or some other integration, you can talk to us about that. But I would
Cool.
certainly take advantage.
Jason, I have one last question, I guess. Are they looking at any challenges for network folks to try to run a discovery like this? It doesn't matter if it's netTerrain or any other S&P network discovery tools.
Um,
It's like,
yeah, I mean,
is there anything that prevents people in discovering their network?
it's usually firewall rules. So
Yeah.
it's usually, so you have different ways sort of around that too. I mean, if you're testing our software in the cloud, you really need to use our collector to do discovery because you'd have to put that on a machine internal. You can put it on your desktop, but that software needs to be able to go out and do an SNMP get from those devices. So it needs to be on a part of the network. It can actually go and do that sort of work and be able to get to those devices. So if you have a firewall that sort of blocks all that, obviously that's not going to work. You can push the data to our server via SNMP, sorry, via 443 using our API. So that part should be hopefully open, wherever the collector is. It just needs to be able to push data out over the internet. If you install the software locally, then you could use the Discovery tab and basically go in and configure SNMP Discovery directly from the app server, assuming the app server is configured to be able to go out and do that SNMP Discovery as well. So, but yeah, it's usually just a firewall rule that you
Okay.
need to configure. If anything, you might be, once you have the collector in your network or on your network, then you may not have rules that are going to block those things. But
Okay.
certainly, if you have a lot of remote locations you need to get data from, you probably need to put some collectors at the different locations.
Okay. And so graphical networks or NetTerrain software can be installed locally on your own server, or we also do offer NetTerrain Cloud. So there are really no, I guess, differences between the two, except maybe with a new version of 10.0 that just got released. In order to use that, uh, you would need to install some probes, right, Jason?
Um, yeah, so that kind of goes back to the collector. So we
Right,
have the collector, we have the probe. If you want to push data into the cloud, so you would need to install one of those in order to capture data
right,
on a
okay,
regular basis and sort of data over time. Um, Installing the software is not terribly hard. So if you do have an environment, we have VM or something, and you have Windows, you can get our software up and running pretty quick. You just need a Windows machine, server, and SQL Server database. That's really kind of your starting point. And but again, not a ton as far as the install goes. It's relatively easy.
yes. And we do offer a 30-day free trial. So anybody wants to run our discovery, see if it works and discovers and maps out your network, feel free to reach out. I
Yeah,
think there was a demo trial setup link there too. And maybe you can shoot Aiden's email address in the chat. Aiden, would you mind?
Yeah, I'll drop in my email. I'm also going to send them a link in their inbox, including a recording of today's
Okay,
session.
great. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I don't know if there are any questions, but thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jason. Thanks,
Take care.
Fred. Thanks, Hannah.
All
Thank
right.
you. Yep. Bye bye.
Take care.